Okay, good morning. I'm going to do this video here to combine 5D part 2 and 5E part 2. 5D is something that we looked at a little bit over the break. I want to refresh that before we go back into some of these quadratic functions that we've done. So, if we recall that the square root of -1 is I, all right? And so what that means is that if we have any negative square root number, like the square root of -n, what that'll simplify to is going to be I times the square root of n. All right, so the negative would come out of the root as an I, and then we're left with whatever root that we have. And if we could simplify the root, we could simplify the root. So for instance, the square root of 4 is 2. So the square root of -4 would be 2i. The square root of 9 is 3, so the square root of -9 would be 3i. Okay, square root of -16 would be 4i, and so on and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's sort of the first step, is that when we have these negative square roots, they don't really exist. You can't take the square root of a negative, but for now what we're going to do is we're going to pull that I out, and then we'll square root whatever number is left in the positive, and then we'll just multiply that by I. Example down here, if we need to simplify a root that is not a perfect square, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to factor the number. So we're going to simplify it by factoring the number, taking out any perfect squares, and then we're going to leave the remainder underneath the square root. And I put a little link here for you guys to click on, and that way you can sort of check the factors of some of these numbers right here, and then it can make it easier to sort of pull the perfect square out. So for instance, I'm going to do these first two here together. I know we did them before break, but let me just sort of recap with you guys here. So we have -98. Obviously, -98 is not a perfect square. So if we click on this factoring calculator here, and so we're going to find the factors of -98, and we're going to calculate it. Okay. As we go through all these factor pairs here, let's find the highest perfect square number: 1, 2, 7, 14, 49, 98. Well, 49 is the only perfect square number right there, and so we have 49 times -2. Okay, so if we're going to go do this, we have the square root of 98 is really going to be the square root of 49 times -2. Again, we could split this up. We could pull out any perfect square. So the square root of 49, okay, the square root of 49 can pull out as 7. Okay, so now we're left with 7 times the square root of -2. The square root of -2 can't really be simplified anymore, but we have a negative on the inside, which means we can have an I on the outside. So what this simplifies to is going to be 7I root 2. And that would be sort of the simplest form of writing that. Let's go over here to -120 over here there. So -120, again, we'll go to our factoring calculator and we'll find the factors of -120. And we'll look at all the numbers that are perfect squares that go into it. So we have 120, 60, 40, 30, 24, 20, 15, 12, 10, 8, 6, 5, 4. 4 is the only number that's a perfect square that multiplies into negative 120. So negative 120 is 4 times negative 30. So square root of negative 120 is going to be 4 times negative 30. Okay. Well, the square root of 4 comes out as 2. And we're left with 2 times the square root of negative 30. But there's one more step. We have a negative inside the root, so we'll pull that outside as I. So 2I root 30 would be the way to sort of simplify that down. Okay. So take a few minutes and do the rest of these problems here, and we'll come back and go over the answers, and then we'll head over to 5E part 2. All right, so on 5E part 2, I'm going to just do this first one here as part of this video, and in case you need sort of a recap, we're going to do this in class as well, but if you want to get a little ahead of the game here. So if we're looking at number 21 from the 5E notes, we couldn't find the roots. There were no roots. There were no roots because we graphed it and it never touched the x-axis. Okay, so we need to use a quadratic formula to find the roots, and we're going to find that we have 2 imaginary roots. Okay, so the quadratic formula, if we recall, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And just off to the side, if we just make a little note of our a, b, and c here, our a is 5, our b is negative 2, our c is 4. Okay, so b is negative 2, so negative b is positive 2. 2 plus or minus, now we have b squared minus 4ac, so b squared is negative 2 squared, which is 4, minus 4 times a, 5, which is 20, times 4, which is 80, so 4 minus 80, all divided by 2a, 2 times a is 10. Okay. So what we end up with is 2 plus or minus the square root of 76, square root of negative 76 over 10. 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 76 over 10. What I want us to do is with the negative 76 is do the same things that we did on 5D part 2 and simplify that negative 76. So we go to our calculator here and we have negative 76. Okay. And let's look at all of our perfect square numbers that go into it. So you get 1, 2, 4, 19, 38, or 76. Well, the only perfect square that goes into negative 76 is 4. Okay, so we'll have 4 plus, or 4 times negative 19. Right. So we can rewrite this thing as 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 times negative 19 over 10. This thing, 4 times negative 19 over 10, will simplify even further. So the square root of 4 we pull out as a 2. The negative we pull out as an I. And we're left with root 19. And we have that whole thing over 10. So our two final roots are going to be 2 plus or minus 2i root 19 over 10. And we could even split this up further into two things. Okay, so what we're going to have is we're going to have 2 over 10, which we could reduce to 1/5, plus this 2 over 10 is also 1/5 I root 19. So that's 2 plus 2i root 19 over 10. We could also minus it. So we could have 1/5 minus 1/5 I root 19. Those are our two final answers, our two final roots with these imaginary numbers right there. So that'll sort of help you do the rest of these, in class as you will, independently. And if you're not here, hopefully this can kind of give you a little guideline to do that. Really, if you, sorry about that. Really, ladies and gentlemen, if we can get to here, to where we can do the quadratic formula, get the number, and then simplify it with an I on the outside, 2 plus or minus 2i root 19 over 10, we're in really good shape. And so, worst case scenario, I would like our goal to sort of be this right here. So that's all we got. 5E part 2 and 5D part 2. And if you have further questions, please let me know, and have a good day.